All right, guys, so I have an absolutely amazing clip here for y'all from a podcast that I just found out about a couple of days ago. It's called the I've Had It podcast with Jennifer Welch and Angie Sullivan, who I guess used to have a show on Bravo, and then they started this podcast, and then they slowly started talking more and more about politics. But obviously, these are not two like Gen Z, radical, lefty, pro-Palestine folks. They're more so your standard liberal wine moms. But we've been talking about this sea change that's been happening in the Democratic voter base, specifically when it comes to left-wing economic populism and when it comes to Israel. And in this clip that we're going to work our way through, they go absolutely nuclear on Democrats who refuse to endorse Zohran, who just won the Democratic primary in New York City, and Democrats who are bought and paid for by AIPAC, as well as at Netanyahu himself, calling him a war criminal and saying he should be in prison. So let's go ahead and jump into this clip here and work our way through.
All right, Pamela and I want to talk to you about something that we talk about quite a bit that is really important that Democrats wrap their heads around. The first aspect of this is that Benjamin Netanyahu is completely anti-democratic. He is a war criminal. He does not serve the interests of Jewish people. He is a dictator to his core, and he should be in prison, and he is committing war crimes every single day. Every single day. It is horrific. It is a tragedy. The only difference between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump is Benjamin Netanyahu is actually smart and a little bit more evil.
Already entirely correct. Entirely correct. And this is the same Benjamin Netanyahu who just made his third trip to Washington, D.C. to meet with Trump in just the first 6 months of his presidency. Obviously, as she points out here, when he should be in handcuffs and being sent off to The Hague to stand trial for the war crimes that he is accused of committing. This is a man who has an active international criminal court warrant out for his arrest, and he is being praised and applauded here in the United States by both political parties. But we continue.
And so I want to talk to you all about this as it pertains to the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party has an AIPAC problem. And as a taxpayer and as a person that isn't religious at all, I have a lot of Jewish friends, and I am a student of World War II, and I believe that anti-Semitism is real, and I think we all have to unite against it. I think the provocations of Israel right now are damaging any actions against anti-Semitism, because it's very hard to stomach when you see a country that claims to be a pillar of democracy and says, oh, we treat people well, and they're bombing hospitals and they're bombing schools. And then you see videos of kids that are starved out, like those kids that were starved out in Auschwitz, and they're eating sand. And it's a real mindfuck to think, how is this group of people doing this to another group of people? And I want to go on the record to say I completely condemn what happened on October 7th, having a child that goes to music festivals, the horror that those parents went through, the horror that those kids went through that were just trying to have fun, and then to be a hostage of Hamas. I condemn all of it, all across the fucking board. But why is the American government and a lot of American politicians taking money from a country that is committing war crimes? And then they can't speak plainly in the interest of American workers because they're fucking compromised. And let's just do roll call on every single one of them. As you all
Okay, so she's going to go on to call out every single Democrat who's taking AIPAC money, who hasn't endorsed Zohran Mamdani, but she just made two very succinct and important points there. Number one, about how the United States and Israel, for decades at this point, have acted as though we are the champions of freedom and democracy and human rights, and we wag our fingers and we impose sanctions on adversarial countries and claim that it's for human rights concerns. And then you look at a situation like this, where Israel is committing a full-blown genocide, where they're attacking hospitals and schools and churches and mosques and refugee camps. They're targeting journalists and aid workers and doctors. I mean, you cannot look at that. You cannot look at this full-blown genocide, not to mention the apartheid structure of the state of Israel, not to mention the ongoing ethnic cleansing in the West Bank and the U.S. support for that, and then come to the conclusion that we support freedom and democracy and human rights. It's just contradicting to the reality that we are seeing on the ground, and she recognizes that, so credit to her. The other important point that she made there was about the anti-Semitism angle, and this is what's so twisted and fucked up about what the state of Israel, the government of Israel, the politicians of Israel, and groups like AIPAC and groups like the ADL. This is what's so fucked up about the anti-Semitism smears, is that they're dissolving what the word anti-Semitism means. When they accuse you of being anti-Semitic, for criticizing the actions of a government, not to mention when that government is committing horrific war crimes on a daily basis. They are erasing the meaning of the word anti-Semitism and actually worsening actual real anti-Semitism, because they're saying what we're doing to the people of Gaza, what we're doing to the people in the West Bank is representative of all Jewish people, which number one, isn't true. And number two, again, is going to drive anti-Semitism. So again, incredible points there, but we continue.
No, I'm super obsessed with Zohran Mamdani and his electoral victory in the primary of the New York mayoral race. And I think this man has a message. I think the Democratic Party should get behind him. I think the Democratic Party should take notes. I think we should go younger. I think we should go further to the left. I think we should campaign for everybody. And Zohran Mamdani leaves no one behind. But AIPAC doesn't like him because he's Muslim, because that's a brand damaging problem for them. If there is a Muslim that comes out and speaks for everybody, they're going to have a hard time convincing Rube Americans that all Muslims are bad and we have to send all our taxpayer money to Israel, who, by the way, gets free healthcare subsidized by us, gets a lot of bombs subsidized by us. And if your kids in Israel want to go to a higher education, guess what? They don't have to go in debt because it's subsidized by us, by these politicians. Let's do roll call. Let's put them up. Let's call them out. Let's go. New York Democrats who haven't endorsed Mamdani and their AIPAC bag. Let's go. Representative Laura Gillen, $94,905. Representative Adriano Espialat, I'm butchering his last name, $202,000. Representative Tom Swazi, $312,000. Representative Dan Goldman, $366,000. Representative Gregory Meeks, $690,000. Representative Grace Ming, $619,000. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, almost $1 million, coming in at $997,000. And I will remind you that she engaged in Islamophobic attacks on this mayoral candidate and didn't defend Islamophobia, yet is so quick to call out anybody as being anti-Semitic. And that's the thing in this, is that we can speak out against the provocations and the war crimes of the Israeli government, and they don't get to hold us hostage and tell us we're anti-Semitic. That's bullshit, and don't fall into that trap. Next up, Representative Rich.
And it's also notable, as I pointed out when we covered Kirsten Gillibrand's comments, is that she actually had to back down from them. And she actually had to come out with a statement kind of walking it all back. And that was notable because typically, if this was a few years back, she could have just gotten away with her Islamophobic smears of Zohran Mamdani, but there was such a grassroots outrage and such a grassroots pushback to her completely bullshit accusations of anti-Semitism against Zohran that she kind of had to fold on that, which again gives you an indication in terms of where the Democratic voter base is, that we're not going to just go along with that anymore.
Torres, $1.5 million. Senator Chuck Schumer, $1.7 million. Hakeem Jeffries, $1.7 million. Representative George Latimer, $19 million, almost $20 million. Pumps, what do you think about all this?
Well, I think you can't serve two masters. You cannot take money from a group and then be completely neutral as to other members of different groups. And if you're going to take that much money from somebody, they're expecting you to further their interests. And I just want to piggyback off of something you said, because that Netanyahu is the smarter, more calculated Trump. Am I correct that prior to October 7th, Netanyahu was in major political trouble in terms of staying in power, and that he had the intel?
That is correct.
About the attacks?
That is
correct.
He
allowed it because it would improve his stance politically.
To stay in power.
To stay in power. And that tells me all I need to know.
And I think the whole Iran thing was a wag the dog away from the egregious genocide and human rights violations that are happening to Palestinians. And this is the part where I get mad at AIPAC, because they want to make everything a binary choice.
That's right.
That you have to support Israel. And here's the thing, like, as somebody who lives in a country right now that has a corrupt government, I don't want to be defined personally by MAGA. I voted against it all 3 times. We get on this behind this camera and behind these mics 2 and 3 times a day talking about we are not this. We have hundreds of millions of Americans are like us that are not like this. We don't want to be judged by the corruption of Taco Tits and all the sociopaths in his cabinet. And I would think similarly.
Right.
Jewish people, at least the ones that I know, they don't want to be judged by the horrific war crimes of Benjamin Netanyahu. They understand that in the fight against anti-Semitism, starving children and shooting people in waiting for humanitarian aid while they're waiting in line is not a way to help it. And quite frankly, it reminds me, the images that I see there and the stories that I hear there, it reminds me a lot of the torture and the deprivation that the Jewish race suffered at the end of World War II. So I'm mystified how they're taking, removing all empathy and allowing history to repeat for young Palestinian children because
All right, so we'll wrap it up there, but absolutely incredible, right? I mean, I genuinely, I cannot believe that this is where much of the Democratic base has moved to at this point. I mean, they're directly calling out Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu for an endless stream of war crimes for 2 years straight now. They're calling out the bullshit anti-Semitic claims when really you're just being critical of a foreign government. They're calling out Democrats both for not endorsing the left-wing economic populists in the campaign, Zohran Mamdani. They're calling out Democrats for being bought and paid for by AIPAC. And you even have one of the hosts here who's going as far as to point out that there are claims that the Israeli government had some sort of pre-warning that there was a major attack coming before October 7th, and that maybe there's a chance that they kind of overlooked those warnings because Benjamin Netanyahu was in a precarious political position personally, and an attack like that could potentially politically benefit him. Like I genuinely am struggling to wrap my mind around the fact that they are this incredible on this topic. I mean, very quickly becoming some of my favorite podcasters when it comes to these issues. So credit to them. And just to to back up some of the things they're saying, specifically with AIPAC, right? I mean, here from Politico, we've talked about this many times before, but just in the 2024 elections, right? AIPAC uncorked $100 million just to sink progressive candidates, right? Now, notice as she was pointing out there, AIPAC doesn't necessarily just serve the interests of the state of Israel. They also just hate progressive candidates in general. And what you'll notice about a lot of their attack ads is that when they go after somebody like Cori Bush, or when they go after somebody like Jamal Bowman, right, who, as they point out there, this guy, George Latimer, got like $20 million from AIPAC. But when they go after them, they don't actually talk about Israel as an issue, because I think they understand that there has been somewhat of a sea change when it comes to the Democratic voter base. And so in a Democratic primary, and we just saw this with Zohran Mamdani, if you're just saying this guy's attacking Israel, some people are going to be like, well, yeah, I mean, he should be, right? I mean, it makes sense to attack a country that's in the midst of committing a genocide with our tax dollars, with the bombs that we're sending them, right? And so they don't even talk about Israel in a lot of the attack ads that they run against these people. They talk about, oh, they're a betrayal to the Biden administration, or they're not, fitting within the Democratic Party, or they're radical on these economic issues, or whatever the case may be. And so it does play into other issues as well in terms of just destroying the left flank of the Democratic Party, which obviously includes people who are critical of Israel, but also people who are correct on a whole host of other issues as well. So this serves not only the state of Israel, but also the wealthy capitalists in this country and the Democratic corporate donor base as well. Now, in terms of where the Democratic Party base actually stands at this point, voters would support the U.S. withholding arms from Israel if Israel violates the ceasefire. So, I mean, that's the question. Do you want an arms embargo on Israel to force them to abide by a ceasefire agreement? Overall, with all voters across the country, it's over 60%, guys. Only 26% opposed. With Democrats, it's over 70%. So what they're talking about here, they're not radicals. They are perfectly in line with the Democratic base at this point. Again, I've pointed out this poll multiple times over the last couple of days, but we had this swing from 2017 in terms of who Democrats sympathize more with. In 2017, it was Israelis, plus 13. Now, it's Palestinians, plus 43. This is not even close as an issue at this point. So, I mean, as they're pointing out there, for Democrats, you can continue to refuse to acknowledge that this is the reality, but it is the reality, right? Notice the disconnect between the Democratic voter base, who overwhelmingly are critical of Israel, who overwhelmingly have wanted a ceasefire for months and months and months and months at this point, who support an arms embargo, who think that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, who want Democrats to stop taking AIPAC money, and then look at that compared to the entirety of the Democratic Party. I mean, how many members of the Democratic Party are actual staunch critics of the Israeli government, who have a principled, consistent view on international law or on human rights abuses? You could probably count them on, a couple of hands, right? They are few and far between, because overwhelmingly the Democratic establishment is bought and paid for by groups like AIPAC, by the Israel lobby, as well as many other corporate lobbies as well, by the way. But this is just the utter and complete disconnect between the Democratic voter base and the Democratic Party establishment that hasn't been reconciled at this point. And what I'm hoping with Zohran Mamdani is that he ends up winning in the general election, and he sort of defiantly proves that you don't have to fold when it comes to your principles. You can stand down on 10 toes and be consistent with your principles. You don't have to fall for the anti-Semitism claims. You can stand principled on that. You don't have to, fall when they call you a radical communist, jihadist, socialist, or whatever. You can just focus on your economic policies, focus on your principles, stand on it, don't back down, and don't blink in the eyes of, overwhelming corporate money. We saw how much money that Cuomo had compared to Zohran. Just run a true grassroots campaign, a pro-working class campaign, an anti-war campaign, and it can be successful. I mean, this is the Democratic voter base. This is what suburban liberals are saying at this point. So maybe this is a real legitimate sea change that we're seeing right now. And again, credit to them. I hope that they, continue to do this, and I might become a regular listener of their podcast. But, absolutely amazing, and you love to see it.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying